So my name's Carissa Young, or Carissa Wilson, married. I shouldn't have done that. So the problem that we're addressing is the sanitation issue in Nigeria. So Nigeria is the third most progressive country in the world on sanitation. Millions of people living in Nigerian slums and informal settlements lack access to proper sanitation systems. This has led to over 25% of Nigerians practicing open defecation. They're forced to use roadsides, railway tracks, and plastic bags. There's no other option. 71% of Nigeria's population does not have access to safe private toilets. That's over 130 million people. In correlation to this, an estimated 45,000 children under the age of 5 they die every year from communicable diseases caused by inadequate access to water, poor sanitation, and hygiene. Also, nearly a third of the hospitals and clinics in Nigeria do not have access to clean water or safe toilets. And 1 in 6 do not have access to proper hand washing stations. So the lack of sanitation and toilets in Nigeria is a huge problem that should be addressed.
All right, my name is Nicole Marley, and to address this problem, our implementation is to create a program that will allow villages and different families in Nigeria to build composting toilets. Composting toilets separate the solid waste and the liquid waste, which keeps odor down, and it allows the solid waste to compost into eventually into usable fertilizer. It takes about 6 months to a year, depending on the temperature and the climate, on how fast it composts. Generally, the composting toilets, you build 2 vaults. So one is in use and one is not, and when one becomes 75% full, you fill it the rest of the way with other compostable items like grass clippings or leaves or palm leaves or anything that's going to help soak up some of the moisture. And then you close that off and you use the other vaults until that one's full, and then the compost should be ready when the other vault is full. The vault size for the composting toilet all depends on how many people will be using it. So depending on how many people per village or per family are going to be using a vault toilet, we would have to make those measurements and decide how big to build the vaults. The vaults are built above the ground to help reduce ground water contamination. There should be none if built properly. And they're built on concrete slabs. And through the composting process, all the pathogens are destroyed through this composting process that goes on. And so it is safe to use, and it also gets rid of the contamination and the cycle of the communicable diseases through the waste. Yeah, I can't think if I missed anything. Sorry.
Sounds good.
All right. Jessica, a few of the barriers we might run into are they do require a bit of training and acceptance to be used. I have a brother who lived in Africa for a bit, and he says they don't necessarily care quite about hygiene. So we definitely have to educate them the importance of it. There is some misuse in clogging with these particular toilets. They do require a bit more upkeep and are difficult to keep clean. Those were just a few of the barriers that we have to address.
Okay, and I'm Courtney Price. So here's our prototype that we built. That's falling apart as I'm showing it. Let me push this back more. Okay, can you guys see it on the camera?
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of it, Nicole kind of covered what all it takes for the composting toilet to work. So what she was talking about, the Volt, which is falling apart on me. Okay, so the Volt would be above ground level, and it's the two sections right here. These are the two separate toilets, or the composting toilets, because you have to divide them. And as she said, the Volt is made of brick and concrete. It has to be, can't let any water into it or any insects into it. So this is where it's actually a 2-chamber Volt. So in the back is where the feces will be expelled, and then in the front, there is another place to use the bathroom for urination, because the two cannot be put together. And as Nicole said, so the feces one is kept until it's about 75% or 2/3 full. And after each use, they will put either lime or ash into it, and that helps take out the moisture and work with the composting. And then whenever it is about 70% full is when they put other materials in there to help get that moisture out so that it can be used for composting. And then they will cover it, and we'll go to the next toilet, or the next stall, I guess you could say. And then for the urine, it is stored anywhere from stored in a Volt for 1 month to 6 months, depending on the temperature. And in that time, it should kill all the pathogens and any pathogens that might be in it. So they will be able to dispel of it without it being toxic. So that's the Volt. And then in the back, sorry, in the back is where they have the chambers. So after the feces has been composted, they have where they can take it out and use it for their composting for their crops, for the fertilization. So that's the Volt part. And I can set that down so I think you guys can see it there. And so they have their little staircase, because it's above ground, obviously. And a few of the things that they have in here. So the 2 straws are supposed to represent the ventilation. And for that, on the top, that they'll be covered with a material, usually mesh, something that can keep the insects out, because we don't want any of the insects getting into the compost Volt. And so, like I mentioned, there'll be 2 places, one for feces and one for urine, while the other one is closed off. And then will be built with trees that they're able to find. They'll just build the 4 walls and build a roof, and this is just supposed to help with the shelter and the protection, to make sure that no insects or animals, or that it's not destroyed by winter. It just helps in assisting keeping the compost in the Volts and away from any environmental factors that might hinder its process to become compost. So that is our prototype. Does anybody else want to add anything to the prototype that I might have missed?
So though I researched the catching the rainwater for washing hands. And so a couple of the different things that have been used before that were successful is just having like a gutter and then covering the gutter with, like you said, mesh or something to keep out debris and stuff. And then it goes down either to like a tank or a barrel. I feel like barrels are probably going to be cheaper, but there was like milk jugs and stuff like that were like easier and cheaper. But for long-term use, I think a tank or a barrel would be great. And it just goes down, and there's just a spigot that they can use the rainwater to wash their hands, and then put like a soap dispenser or something next to it and dig a little trench under it, so the water can flow down and doesn't just pool there and then go out to the side. So you could use the resource of rainwater to provide hand sanitation.
Awesome.
We also found a thesis paper of somebody who did this in Paraguay in 2015, so fairly recently, and he built like 22 composting toilets, and he figured out all the materials and everything, and he said that you could build these for roughly about $350. So they're relatively inexpensive for the amount of people that are using them and to provide sanitation. And so I think would be able to build enough to make a difference using different funding that's available.
Alrighty. And I think that covers everything we were supposed to cover. Anything else we want to add before we end it? Alrighty, so we're just going to end it here.